What's up friends, DustFood here, and just recently on November 28th we had a pretty big dev stream where they laid out what next year is going to look like before we get to the anniversary event. Of course, Dead by Daylight does not really operate off of the calendar that we use. They go off of the DBD calendar, so the anniversary event is the start of the new year, and that's why, by the way, some people got on to me. I made the video about like what will year 8 look like, and it was like, oh, it's not going to be year 8 yet. It's like, well, I was going off their calendar, just clarifying, but I do see where I should have clarified that in the video alone. But either way, they have laid out what the next year is going to look like, and there's some pretty exciting stuff, there's some pretty worrying stuff, so let's get into it. Let's talk about what they told us is on the way. Now before we get going, I do want to remind you, I do stream on Twitch usually about 3 days a week, so if you want to head over to DOS_food, I'd love to see you around, love for you to come in and interact with the community. I know you don't have to do it, maybe you just watch the YouTube videos, and that's cool too. I appreciate you all the same, but I wanted to put it out there, as well as tell you, hey, if you like it, if you subscribe, I appreciate that too. My new goal is to get this channel to 20k views, hopefully by, let's say, early next year, so January, February, somewhere around that time. But you know, look, I appreciate all the support either way, and now let's get right back into the video and talk about the stuff you actually came here for. The first thing that they brought up was the field of view slider, and this sounds like it's just going to be a base kit Shadowborn being added, which is of course widening the field of view by 15 degrees. And what they didn't really specify was if it's going to be a situation where you can widen it up to 15 degrees, or if it's just going to be base kit, everybody gets 15 degrees widened, and there's no choice in it. But I think because they said slider, I would imagine that means you can go from exactly what you have now up to base kit Shadowborn. And obviously that does mean Shadowborn is getting a rework. But we're going to touch on the perk reworks in just a little bit. First, I want to talk about the 3-gen rework, which is, this is one of those things that's interesting because you talk about everything that was said here today, and I think this is the one that divided people the most, because you have people who rightfully say, hey, wait a minute, if survivors don't pay attention and they just 3-gen themselves, I should not be punished for that. And that's true. You should not be punished for that. But the flaw, I think, that comes with that line of reasoning is assuming that more often than not, when you get a 3-gen scenario, that it's the survivors who initiated it. It's not. I think more often than not, what you see is killers who are setting out from the jump, from the get-go. They're saying, I am going to 3-gen this game. And you know, I'm guilty of it sometimes. I'm guilty of sometimes going in and saying, well, this game's kind of getting away from me. Let me start patrolling a 3-gen. And unfortunately, it's not something I like to do as much anymore because I find that it leads to like 40-minute games, but it is a thing that is available most times in a game. So I think that really this is one where it's easy to point and laugh at the survivors, but I think that's missing the point. So this is a good one. It's just, look, it's in the words of the devs themselves. They were saying it's not aimed at normal gameplay. It's just aimed at very intentional and very obvious instances of trying to 3-gen. So for me, I think this one's very healthy. I think it's gonna be a good change. Also excited, looks like we're getting a Sadako rework early next year. That's exciting. I think that most people could agree that Sadako has a lot of potential as a killer, but right now I don't think anybody's especially happy with where she is. There are aspects of her kit that I like and aspects that I think a lot of people like. So, you know, obviously nobody's calling for a total ground up rework, but they said that they want to try to get closer to her original iteration in the game, and also they want to address this condemned playstyle that's become so popular. So this is another one, I think, tentatively good change. Obviously we have to see it. We have to see it in the game before we can really say anything about it, but yeah, I don't know. I think it's gonna be a good one. Hillbilly also getting a rework, and if you're like me, you don't really understand why they ever added the overheat mechanic, which thankfully they said they're going to work to make it less frustrating, which is kind of a win and a loss in that front, because it's a win that they recognize that the overheat mechanic is just super stinky and nobody likes it. But they didn't say they're going to get rid of it, which to me is the easiest fix for Hillbilly, is just get rid of overheat, but they said they're going to make it less frustrating. So realistically, what we're looking at is not getting rid of it, but instead doing something where it just takes it a lot longer for the overheat mechanic to get going, which I don't know, just get rid of it. That seems so simple, and maybe between now and then they'll come around to that. But Blight is the last killer that's going to get a big rework. in this early part of next year. And this one's all about the add-ons. This one, you know, bye-bye. they are getting dealt with. I think Blight's going to have numerous ones just get nuked from orbit, because what they've surely seen is that Blight is obscenely strong even without add-ons. So Blight does not need crazy good add-ons. The best case scenario in my mind is not that Blight has insanely strong add-ons, but that he has fun add-ons that change the style of play for Blight, because that way you can get Blights who maybe aren't sweating as much, and even if they are sweating, they don't have, you know, all of the absolutely busted ones that he has right now. Because right now, I'll tell you, Blight, if you go up against a decent to good Blight and they're using the best add-ons, it's very unfun. It's very unfun. So I think that's a good change, and I think that's the one out of the three. It's kind of like, okay, Hillbilly, it's probably going to be a lukewarm response because it doesn't sound like they're committing to making them really fun. Sadako, no telling where that one goes, but Blight, this one's good. Everybody's gonna like this, except for, of course, certain Blight mains. After that, we get a round of perks that are going to be adjusted, and they're going to touch up on a lot of perks before the anniversary next year, but the first batch of them is gonna be STBFL, save the best for last, Grim Embrace, Quick Gambit, Shadowborn, and Monitor and Abuse. Now, STBFL's the big one. This is almost definitely going to be a nerf, and kind of makes me cry. I am imagining the way they're going to rework it is that it will either deactivate after the last gen pops, so you can't use it in the end game to like camp a hook or something, or you'll just lose more stacks when you hit the obsession. So maybe instead of losing 2 stacks when you hit the obsession, you lose 4. So if you hit the obsession twice, you're back down to 0 stacks, right? Of course, it could also be reworked so that maybe it changes who the obsession is throughout the match, though I would argue that's actually probably a buff, so I don't think they'll do that, but you never know. It's a huge cause of concern for M1 killers, because as I tweeted about on the Twitters, I like it that we have a perk right now that is basically borderline garbage on stronger killers like Nurse and Blight, but it's really, really good on weaker killers like the Clown. I'm a Clown main. Obviously, I'm going to be biased for Clown, but it's good on all M1 killers, especially the Clown. I don't love that they're going to touch up this perk, but as long as it's something kind of minor, that's acceptable. I understand where maybe it gets frustrating for the other side. I mean, granted, I play a lot of Survivor these days, more so than I play Killer, and I don't really mind it, but again, that's subjective, so they got to take in what the wider community feels. Next is the Artist perk, Grim Embrace, and look, I expect this one to be a buff. Just bump the numbers, because the way it works right now is after you hook all 4 survivors at least once, it will block off all of the gens for 40 seconds, and that's not, it's not nothing, but just bump it up to a full minute, and I think you're probably good. I would also say maybe add some kind of aura benefit, because survivors do tend to just stealth around once all the gens get blocked. They're like, oh shoot, okay, well I guess we're just gonna stall out for the next 40 seconds. So I would say give some kind of way where maybe at least like the furthest away survivor from you is revealed to you or something like that. I don't know, just something to make it a little more tempting. Next is Quick Gambit, which is a Vittorio perk, and this one, there's just no chance that it's not either a buff and a strong buff or an entire rework, because it is a horrible perk at the moment, and it definitely needs it needs some tender love and care, because it's in a bad way. Shadowborn and Monitor and Abuse are getting changed as well. We don't really know what it's going to look like. Shadowborn, I expect Shadowborn to probably have just a completely different function going forward. Don't know what it's going to be, but I think it's probably going to be unrecognizable from what it is now. And then Monitor and Abuse, my leaning is they're just going to take out the field of view part. I think they're going to keep the perk the exact same every other way and just take out the field of view stuff. Once all that's done, we move on to a next phase of the big changes they're doing, and that's going to be kicked off with a Mangled rework, which means, of course, they kind of put one at the top and one at the bottom, but they go hand in hand. That means Sloppy Butcher is getting reworked, as well as Mangled, just in general. And they said that they're trying to keep it useful but make it less frustrating, which I think it's a high risk change here, because as it stands, Mangled is pretty useful, but in my opinion, not generally oppressive. In fact, I always get excited when I see Mangled because I bring Autodidact almost every game, and let me tell you, Mangled is Autodidact's best friend. So really, if you want to deal with this one, just tell everyone just to run Autodidact. It's the coolest perk in the game anyway. But obviously that's not going to happen, but I don't necessarily see the point in changing this, because right now, I think Mangled serves a really useful purpose in that survivors cannot heal themselves 99% of the way, and then once they get in a chase, just tap it and be healed. I think that's something that used to be pretty common, and it was always very frustrating, and I wouldn't argue that it's necessarily skillful gameplay. So I don't know. I think for me, I hope this is a pretty minor rework, but it probably probably won't be because behavior generally likes to kind of bring down a sledgehammer whenever they want to rework something. So I'm worried about it, but I hope it's pretty minor. After that, we get what they specifically said were killer tweaks and not killer reworks. So don't expect a major power change or, you know, something of a substantial variety for any of these, but it's going to be Hag, Pig, Huntress, Demogorgon, and Clown. Oh, and Doctor, sorry. And Doctor. Sorry, Doc, didn't mean to leave you out there, but Hag, I'm assuming this one will be almost entirely add-on related, though it's possible that Hag may get rewarded with a base speed buff after having to suffer through Made for this and Hope for half a year. It's wild to me that it took them like 6 months of having survivors literally be faster than one of the killers. That's kind of hard to wrap my head around, but you know, so maybe Hag gets rewarded, but honestly I think it'd be a mistake because if you give Hagatha 115% movement speed, yikes, that's probably too strong. Pig, again, add-ons, I would imagine, but don't be surprised if they also buff the crouch and or stealth aspects of what she's doing, because I think that's something they really want to be a part of the Pig, but right now it's just so detrimental to take that time to, you know, to lose speed, to lose field of view, to lose all that just so you can drop your terror radius. It's not very good, especially in light of killers like Ghostface existing. They're gonna do the Huntress after that, and honestly, I have no idea what they're gonna change with Huntress, but whatever they do here, look for it to be minuscule. Look for it to be almost unnoticeable, because what would you change about Huntress? I think survivors and killers alike are pretty happy with where she is. Same goes for Demogorgon. I think that Demogorgon is really just looking at barely noticeable changes, because I think, as I've said quite a few times, I think Demogorgon's debatably the most well-balanced killer, so I'm not looking for any meaningful changes here. Next would be the Clown, and in my dream world, they give Clown an extra bottle, or they slightly buff the invigorated status effect. In reality, I would imagine what they're going to do is nerf his distortion effects, which I get it, I get the case for that, but I'm not super stoked about it because all of a sudden he becomes F tier again, which would probably open him up to a full-on rework. So I don't love that as an idea, but again, I get the case for it. I get where some people say it gives them migraines and all that. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants anybody to feel physically ill playing the game. So I do get that. There is also one other alternative for both Clown and Huntress that I haven't mentioned, and that's that they both have insta-down add-ons that may get nerfed. In my personal opinion, I still think that the Eerie Head and the Pinky Finger are just obscenely strong. I played my first Pinky Finger game in about 2 years here recently, and yeah, I stomped. It's too easy because bottle tosses are way too easy to hit. So I would absolutely think that that's possible, that that's what they're addressing, because the only, you know, there are other ones with insta-down abilities like that, but in the case of like Deathslinger, it's just so hard to get those shots that I think they're okay with rewarding it, but you know, that's possible. And then for Doctor, I would say that this is another one where I'm hoping for the best, but I am expecting the worst. Here's hoping that they just tweak some add-ons and don't nerf the base kit in any meaningful way, because Doctor's in an alright place. Yes, he can be obnoxious, but that's kind of his character design. So if your design's like, okay, well, we're going to make the Doctor less obnoxious, it's like, okay, well, you're going to make him less of the Doctor. I don't like that as a thought. I don't really like that. Moving on, we get more perk changes. This time it's only 2 of them, but damn, this is a big 2. So it's Ultimate Weapon, which is of course Xenomorph, and then Decisive Strike from Laurie Strode, which, oh my, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Here we are, almost 2024, and we're still talking about Decisive Strike. And at risk of sounding like a total and complete survivor main, I'm gonna tell you, I think Ultimate Weapon needs a nerf, and I think Decisive Strike needs a buff. And I know that's gonna get people to say, oh, you survivor main, but hear me out. Let's be honest. This is overdue. I'm shocked that they're waiting this long to address this perk being Ultimate Weapon. How is it that we live in a world where Thwack has a hook requirement, but Ultimate Weapon doesn't? Is it really just because Thwack has the aura aspect? Is that it? Because, I mean, be serious. Come on. That is terrible. That is terrible. It needs a nerf. It needs a harsher cooldown. It needs some kind of activation. It needs something to where you can't basically have it set up where you finish a chase, and after you're done with any given chase, you can just go open a locker and find where everybody is. That's tragic. That is just very unfortunate. And then Decisive Strike really just needs to be stronger, and all they need to do is revert it back. The current stun timer just really doesn't justify taking this perk. It's not enough of a deterrent for tunneling killers. And look, I don't have a problem with tunneling, but I know they don't want it to be the go-to strategy. So if your goal is to cut down on tunneling, you need things that are going to punish tunneling. And one thing that's going to do that, of course, is a good Decisive Strike. Now, obviously, don't take it back to its original form where the killer's going to eat 4 Decisive Strikes every game. That, no matter what they do, that was horrible. Obviously, nobody in their right mind is calling for that. But I do think just go back to the original stun duration. I'm very disturbed by the fact that they would lessen the stun duration when I don't think most killers, and maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think most killers, myself included as a filthy clown main, I don't think most of us had a problem with the stun duration. I think that was far from the issue with the perk. And then finally, the last thing they're doing is the long-awaited Twins rework, and we'll have to see on this one because it was something like 2 years ago that they promised a Twins rework, and eventually they just admitted, they said, hey, look, we tried it, we couldn't figure anything out, we're gonna put it on the back burner. So this is them recommitting to that. Hopefully they figure it out because I think they were very vague about it, but I would imagine that they'll try to cut down on the Twins slugging capabilities and also make them smoother to play, because right now I like the Twins, I'm a big fan of the Twins, but they're very clunky. I played one recently on Midwich, and even the survivors were joking around with me after the game. We were having a good time with it because we were like, man, how many invisible objects did Victor get caught on? It's just insane. It makes it so much less fun to play this killer, and I think if they can make the Twins a lot smoother and possibly find a way to, I don't know, I mean, I don't think the slugging's a huge issue because there's so many ways to counter slugging, but again, I'm in the minority. I get that. This is where now I get called a filthy killer main. It's like, oh, you don't think tunneling and slugging are a problem? No, I don't. I really don't. I think there's parts of the game, and same goes for camping. I don't mind camping, but you know, that's I'm a real sick guy, a real weirdo. But you know, they did also confirm Victor is not getting cosmetics, which I do genuinely think would make the character a lot more popular. So for shame, behavior, for shame. And now you can't even use the whole issue of like, well, they don't want to give Victor cosmetics because it's the killer's power. It's like Chucky. Chucky is small. His power is just running at people, kind of like Victor. So that one's kind of put to bed. Yeah, give Victor cosmetics. Come on, what are we doing? Give Victor a fun little hat. But ultimately, those are my thoughts on everything that I saw. Overall, I think it looks like we have a pretty promising stretch of months coming up. I think we're going to be looking at an even healthier version of the game. I am surprised with certain things on here. Some of the killers that are getting tweaks at all, and then they're waiting so long for Ultimate Weapon to get addressed is very shocking. But I guess that's just turnabout because it took forever for Made for this to get addressed. So I guess they're just trying to be really patient and not give in to initial outcry when people don't like a perk. But I am curious to know what you think about this. Do you think these are good changes? Which one has you most excited? Which one has you the most nervous? I'm curious to see what you say here. But anyway, until the next video, I've been Das Food. Bye, friends.
I've been dreaming on in my head like I've seen it. A life worth living is a life with meaning. I'll do what I love till my heart stops beating. I'm feeding this demon. Got a taste, can't erase bitterness in my